Today, I'm going to address the question that's on the minds of many people today. Given what you're seeing on the news, given what's happening in the world, is this the end? Is this the end? Are we about to destroy this world and everything on it? Stick around and I'm going to talk about it.
Welcome to my take. Well, it's not my take, it's Miguel Crespo's take. Whatever. For inspiration to go.
Welcome to My Take, Pastor Crespo here. My Take is your oasis of inspiration and hope in the desert of negativity and despair. Thank you for joining the podcast and being a part of the My Take family. Well, my friends, it seems like I feel like I need to start the episode with an apology. I'm trying to put these out regularly. I have not abandoned the podcast, but I'm going probably about once a month now, where I really would like to get one a week. But the truth is that I am engaged in a lot of different projects. Uh, the podcasting is not my main job. I have a job. I'm a pastor. I'm an administrator of other pastors, but I'm also involved in two other podcasts. And while I'm at it, I might as well let you know a little bit about those two podcasts as well, because I would encourage you, go check them out, subscribe, like, share them with your friends. There's one that's called Try Jesus Auburn. Now, this is a localized effort in the Auburn, New York area. I'm working with a colleague of mine, a pastor there, where we're just trying to share the gospel with the people specifically in that area. There's another called the Indigenous Podcast. Now, this is also, we're in the central New York area. And the goal of that podcast is to really reach a segment of people that may look at the world from a different point of view. People who are indigenous, people who are not a part of the quote unquote majority. They have a different way of looking at things, and there are many things in their lives that have just not, in some ways, been rejected, neglected, not paid attention to. And so we're trying to find a way to connect, build a relationship with them as well, value them, and also find a way to let them know about the Creator God who loves them and died for them, and of course is coming back again. So I'm engaged in those two podcasts, and in the effort of building those up, this one has taken a little bit of a hit. But I want you to know that I this podcast is important to me. I really appreciate that you are willing to listen, check it out. And of course, let me just tell you, like, share, subscribe, let people know this podcast exists. I will be putting out these episodes regularly. And I have to tell you, wow, with the things that have been happening, um, I made a joke the other day. Man, I've been off doing different things, and while I was away taking care of a few other things, not paying attention, it looks like the world just fell apart. I mean, the wheels have come off the wagon off of planet Earth. Have you? It's crazy, and I know, I know if you are not, well, I guess it doesn't matter whether you're a devout Christian or whether you're on the edges of Christianity or of faith in general. It doesn't matter. It's hard to see what is happening in the world today and not begin to wonder what is going on. I mean, there's craziness happening. I mean, what can we talk about? Let's talk about the first thing here. And I was looking at these things and they were just kind of just overwhelming almost. But everyone knows about the fight between Iran and Israel. That the Iran has been alleged to be using for years and years these proxies, these terrorist group to attack Israel. And finally, Israel, because they felt that they were getting close to a nuclear bomb, or at least that's what's been shared in the news, that because they felt they were getting close to building a nuclear bomb, that Israel said, forget it, we're going right to their homeland. And they began to attack them on Iranian soil. Boy, of course, all the news outlets went nuts, and they're afraid that this is going to lead to something on a larger scale, because all of the friends of these two nations, for example, the U.S., for example, China, Russia, on the Iranian side, where is this going to go? What's this going to mean? Well, it wasn't too long after that President Trump, our current president, was trying to reach out to the Iranians. He was trying to get them to, quote unquote, as he calls it, to make a deal. They did not listen. They did not follow his lead. And it wasn't too long ago that the news came out that the United States joined joined Israel in the attacks against Iran and used their famous bunker buster bombs to destroy, I believe it was 3 nuclear sites, places where they were refining the uranium and bringing it up to a level that it can be used for a nuclear weapon. Now, I'm not a nuclear bomb expert. I'm just, this is what I've read, and they felt that they were enriching the uranium to a point where it could be used beyond to create energy, but to be able to use it as a weapon of mass destruction. So the U.S. attacks Iran. Well, guess what? Of course, if you watch the news now, everyone's concerned. Wait a minute. First, it's Iran and Israel. Now it's Israel and U.S. against Iran. Wait a minute. Is someone going to come to Iran's aid? What's going to happen? People were starting to say World War III. Everyone's worried about that. But as soon as it happened, as soon as the battle started, it seems like it almost ended because it looks like the Iranians have decided to come to some sort of compromise. Aside from all the saber rattling that's been done on the news, I think behind the scenes they've been able to figure out they're gonna do something. But just when you think it's over, just when you think things are getting back to normal, of course, you know what's happening in the United States with the push against illegal immigration, people who are here who are undocumented, and the raids that our immigration enforcement has been making. Just recently, we're seeing not only are they raiding areas, some businesses going after here those who are people who are here illegally, or what they're saying the criminal illegals, people who are in gangs and things like that. Now we heard just recently that there was a protest at a ICE facility, and people actually tried to break in with the intent of freeing some of the people who are uh, in jail there. And now I believe just the other day they were saying if you can see me now, that there are protesters who actually had the nerve to attack ICE agents. They're trying to hurt them, maybe even kill these federal officers. And so there's all this civil unrest. So there's these nations fighting that might draw us into World War III. But at the home front here in the United States, we also have things happening that are taking place and just driving people to a point of uncertainty and fear. Well, guess what? We're not done yet. There's still more stuff. Just recently, we just had a spate of floods. If you heard of the horrible flooding, the flash flooding that took place in Texas, where there was a of note a camp called, I believe, Camp Mystic, a Christian camp, and in the middle of the night, the floodwaters raised up, and many dozens of campers were washed away. They say that from that one flooding alone in the Texas, I think it's Kerr County in Texas, over 100 people have lost their lives, and many of them were little girls. That's where they at that camp, little girls who had lost their lives. Families have been devastated, but it's not just in Texas. In other parts of the center of the country, other states are suffering from flash floods, from rain. It's just pouring, 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 and people are losing their lives because it's just catching them by surprise. So we have wars between nations. We have the United States, our own homeland, getting involved and trying to solve some issues in order to protect us, in order to keep Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. Now they've decided to use some of their bunker busting bombs. ICE raids, illegal immigration, clashes against the civil authorities, law enforcement. And here we have now nature. Nature seems to be losing its mind also. Oh, but I have one more thing. One more thing just to top it all off. You can't even see me anymore because there's just too many slides on the screen. But did you hear about the Jeffrey Epstein situation? Here's a situation where this guy who is a purveyor of filth, providing children to the rich and powerful for them to use and abuse. Remember, he was arrested some years ago, and then while he was in jail, he quote unquote committed suicide. I don't know anyone who believed that. And then when this new administration came in with the promise that they were gonna get to the bottom of this, they're gonna tell us what happened. Well, they said, well, guess what? Jeffrey Epstein did commit suicide. He killed himself. No one killed him. He did it to himself. And then the client list, the supposed list of people who the supposed list of people who went to his island, participated in only God knows what, that there is no list. That they don't have any evidence of anybody going. They don't have a list. This is drove. That's not the right word. I gotta get better at my English apparently. This has driven conservatives and liberals nuts, crazy, because it's bad enough. It's bad enough to take advantage of young people. But then when it seems like, we're getting to the bottom of something, and then they come up with this story. I don't know if I believe it or not. I can tell you it sounds really fishy. And I can tell you what I think, but really what I think doesn't matter. I don't want to get into politics. This program, this episode, this podcast is really to give you inspiration and hope. But it's been hard lately. There's all these things that have been happening, and you can't help but ask. You don't have to be a theologian. You don't have to be a committed Christian to look at the news and not say, "Man, what is going on?" It's like disaster after disaster. It's not only it's nations fighting each other, it's nature fighting us. It's sometimes sounds like people covering for wicked, powerful people. What is going on? The question that's on the minds of some is this the end of the world? Now, I am generally an optimistic person. I'm a happy person. I'm just this is the way God wired me. But even myself, sometimes I've been looking at what's happening and saying, "Wow, if I'm asking the question, what is going on? It seems like all what is broken loose." I want to talk about it on this podcast. So, look, I want to share something with you to answer this question of is this the end? And let me tell you that I'll just tell you right now, it's not the end. This is not the end. There's more. There's more that has to come. There's more that you need to know. And I think you might be surprised when I share some of this with you. But I want to give you some encouragement. I hope that you leave this episode with some inspiration and hope. But let me say this. Because I try not to get too deep, because I'm not trying to reach committed theologians, people who are study the Bible. I'm trying to reach regular people who, they have questions, but they don't read the Bible that often, or maybe you don't even go to church that often. But although you should. You should go to church, like, a lot. But if you don't and you have questions, I want to try and be that source for you, to try and share information with you that is from the Bible, but in a way that hopefully is simplified and easy to understand. So I'm going to try to do that with you in this episode. I want to answer the question, is this the end of all things? Are we here? Is this it? Are we about to destroy ourselves? Now, in order to do that, I think probably the best place to go would be to go to the Bible in Matthew chapter 24. Um, chapter 24 is just, well, it's an interesting chapter. Let me give you a little bit of background here. In that chapter, Jesus directly answers the question about the end of the world. So let me start by saying this. In the beginning of chapter 24, Jesus, he's walking with his disciples, and he's leaving the temple, and the disciples are they're kind of looking at the temple and how old it is, its historic value and the cultural value, and talking about how amazing it is. And they're trying to point it out to Jesus, but Jesus looks at him and he says, and this is recorded in Matthew 24 verse 2. He said, "You see all these things? I verily I say unto you that there shall not be left one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down." Now, the disciples understood this. When they got this, they understood this to mean that what Jesus is talking about has to be the end of the world. They, in their minds, thought that God would never, ever let his temple be destroyed. There's no way, in their minds. They didn't understand. They were looking at it a little bit differently than, of course, than God is. But in their mind, Jesus mentioning the destruction of the temple with the end of all things. And so, if we read in verse 3, what you read is you see this, that, and you know what, I'm going to change this to a different version just to make it for easier reading. Matthew 24 verse 3, and as he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, "Tell us, when will these things be? What will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" Jesus said, "See that no one leads you astray, for many will come in my name, saying, 'I am the Christ,' and they will lead many astray." And he says this, "And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not alarmed, for this must take place. But the end is not yet." Do you hear that? when Jesus was talking with the disciples, they were worried about when is the end of the world going to be. And he tells them, and it's important for you and I to understand. He says, look, there are two things that are mentioned here. One is there's a spiritual war and a physical war. He says there's going to be false Christ. There are going to be people that say that they have the the spiritual answer to your problems. That's one thing you need to be aware. Be aware of beware, not be aware, beware of false messiahs, people peddling false hope, false truth. But he says this, and there's going to be wars and rumors of wars. But he says, listen, don't be discouraged. Don't be upset. These things have to happen, he says, but the end is not yet. So if you ask the question and you say, well, is this the end of all things? Well, why would you ask that question? Well, look at what's happening. Countries are battling against each other. There's threats of nuclear war. There's threats of we're going to go to World War III. Well, Jesus said, Jesus' words to you, I'm sharing them with you, is don't be discouraged. Don't 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 allow this to take your peace away. This has to happen. But the end is not yet. So you know what I find interesting, and I'm trying not to get too deep here, but I hope I can make the point to you that Jesus refers to a time of great turmoil and wars between nations. But he says, but don't be discouraged. The end is not yet. Wait a minute. Are you telling me that there's more that has to happen? What has to happen as a sign that we're near the end? I mean, is Jesus going to say, well, things actually have to get worse so that you know Jesus is coming soon? You know I'm coming soon, Jesus speaking. Let me share with you what's in here because this is pretty amazing. Jesus says in verse where am I? Verse 7. He says this, and this is a repetition. He says, for nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and earthquakes in various places. But he says this, all these are but the beginning of birth pains. So he repeats what he says earlier, and he tells him, he says, don't be alarmed. See that you are not alarmed. This has to happen. The end is not yet. This is just the beginning of the birth pains. If you understand that term, when a woman is reached her term where the baby is developed in her womb and now it's time to deliver, she starts to get contractions and it starts to tighten up and then contract and release, contract and release. She knows it's about that time. I need to get to the hospital. It's the same thing. The wars and rumors of wars, all these things happening, it's not the end. It's a sign that the end is coming. But there's something else that God is saying that this is a sign of the end. This is a sign that this is about to happen. What is it if it's not wars and rumors of wars? Well, this is the really interesting part. I'm going to read to you the next few verses. Um, let's see, where am I here? Verse 9. Verse 9 says this. This is after the wars and rumors of wars and the begin. This is just the beginning. He says this. Then they will deliver you up to tribulation and put you to death, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. There is something that Jesus says that is coming after all these beginnings of sorrow. After the birth pains begin, what is next? What is another part of the sign of the end? Well, Jesus says that a part of this sign of the end is that people who carry the name of Jesus are going to suffer persecution. Some even put to death. It says, you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. Now let's pause there for a second. If you are a student of history at all, you know that persecution of Christians has happened forever. But Jesus makes a point here that many people read and they just go by. He says, you're going to be hated by all nations for my name's sake. Look, in 2020, we had a dry run of what I think this is going to look like. Now, you have to be careful because algorithms, they block you off or they block the episode. But in 2020, we all know that just about the entire world got together and they said, we have a problem. And if you want to avoid suffering this problem, you need to get the, in your arm. And the whole world practically united. It didn't matter what language you spoke. It didn't matter your culture. Everybody pretty much was on the same page. And the people, the outliers, the ones that didn't want to participate, they were, I'll use the word hated. They were hated because they didn't want to do what the majority wanted to do. This is a dry run. This is an example. When Jesus says here, they're going to deliver up to a tribulation and put you to death, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. He's saying, this is what's going to happen. The entire world is going to come after you, not because you don't want to take the, psh, no, because you choose to bear my name. People who choose to be Christians in the end. What does that mean? It means this, that there's something coming that's worse than wars and rumors of wars. And that is, it's a spiritual battle, a spiritual battle against people who want to be faithful to the Bible and Jesus, and those who choose to be faithful to a different form of religion. Now, I don't have time to get into this, but in the book of Revelation, it's the same thing. In the end, my friend, whether you are a Bible believing Christian or not, please listen to me. In the end, the final battle, the things having to do with the true end of the world, revolve around worship. Who you will worship. Who do you consider to be your God? And those that choose Jesus, those that choose the Bible, are going to be persecuted. It's very clear. The Bible's clear on that. Let me share a couple of more verses with you here. Verse 10, Matthew 24, verse 10. And then he says this, and then many will fall away and betray one another and hate one another. This is internally. These are Christians internally because of what's happening. They're gonna turn on one another, it seems. And in verse 11, and many false prophets will arise and lead many astray. And verse 12, and because lawlessness will be increased, the love of many will grow cold. What's happening here? What's the Bible describing? You know, if you ask the question, is this it? Is this the end of the world? Well, if you look at it the way Jesus explains it, Jesus says, look, if you're looking at wars between nations, if you're looking at natural natural disasters, if you're looking at what's happening among men in their world as signs that this is the end, well, you're only a little you're half right, because what these are, they're just a sign of the beginning. These are what we would call the birth pains, but the real pain, the real problem will be when the world begins to say those who are Christians are a problem. They do not want to conform to the majority. They choose to follow Jesus. They choose to, if you're going to follow Jesus, you need to follow his word because the word is a revelation of Christ. Those who follow Jesus and his word, Jesus said, that is a sign of the end of the world. And he says that even internally, even and why internally? Why amongst Christians will this become an issue? Because there are people who go to church but are not in the church. People who sit in the pew but don't have Jesus in their heart. People who go to church out of tradition, custom, but they really haven't surrendered their heart to him. They don't pray to him. They don't talk to him. They've not surrendered their lives to him. They don't do things according to his commandments. They don't live their life according to his ways. And even amongst those, there are going to be people that will lead people astray. And it says the love of some of these people is going to grow cold. Their love for God. What I find interesting is this: is that what Jesus' answer to how do we know the end of the world is upon us? It's not about wars or natural disasters. It's about the fact that people who choose to worship Jesus are going to be the focal point of the world and are going to be persecuted. When you see things flip, then you know we're near the end. Now, do we see signs of that? Well, I'm going to give you my opinion. This is my own personal belief. If you follow what's been happening in the last few years, especially with the last presidential, with the last administration of the last president, it seemed that we were in such a in such a rush to be so inclusive. We were so desirous to be open minded and to love people that we were espousing things that were totally anti Christian, totally anti Bible, and I'm sorry, some people may not agree, but some of these things were just downright un American. Um, but then now we have a new administration. And it's funny to me how this administration now it seems to be more openly talking about God, more openly talking about Jesus. You had people who were selected to fill certain offices standing before the congressional Senate hearing when they were having their nomination and they were talking and meeting. And and saying, I trust Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. When was the last time you heard Jesus' name proclaimed so boldly by politicians on national television? Now, I'm not saying they're devout Christians in their hearts. I don't know that. Only God knows if they're sincere. But I have to tell you, I've heard Jesus' name mentioned more in the news in the last few months than in the last 4 years. Christianity is becoming more and more in vogue. The question is, what version of Jesus, what version of Christianity are people really accepting? And as Christianity becomes more and more fashionable, becomes more and more promoted, where will we go from there? I think that we're about to see something very biblically prophetic happening. Because here's what I read. Here's what I understand when I read Jesus' words. Jesus is not saying that these countries fighting, this is the end. No, he says what really is going to happen at the end is that there's going to be a clash between true religion and fake religion. People who want you to worship the world, people who want you to worship God. Now, let me just go way back in history to give you an example. There was a time when Christians were persecuted by the Roman Empire. And the emperors of the Empire of Rome were believed to be gods. One of the things that Christians suffered from is that they believed, and of course, we believe that there is only one God. When persecution came to the Christians, it didn't usually come in the just because you're a Christian, we're going to persecute you. No. What many of these Christians had to face was you're not being asked to give up your faith. You're just being asked to modify it a little bit. In the early days of Christianity, when Rome was in charge and when Christians were being persecuted by the Roman Empire, this was before the conversion of Emperor Constantine to Christianity, because that's a whole nother story. But these Christians were told, all you need to do is admit, yes, I believe in my God, but the emperor is also a God. That's all you had to do. You didn't have to give up your faith in Jesus. You didn't have to give up your faith in God. You just had to acknowledge that the emperor is also a God. So just add one more God to your religion and we won't have to kill you. See, I believe that in the end, a test is going to come. History loves to repeat itself. That we're going to have to face fake religion with true religion. And that is when Jesus, this world is about to end and Jesus is right there. Is this world going to end? Yes. Is this world going to end soon? Boy, I think so. But we need to have just an understanding that we don't need to be afraid of wars and rumors of wars. We don't need to be afraid of World War III ending the planet as we know it. The Bible tells us, and you can study it in the books of Daniel, you can study in the books of Revelation, Matthew 24 talks about it here, that there is going to be a push to persecute people who hold on to the name and the faith of Jesus. That is the real sign of the end of the world. But see, even in that, my friends, even in that, it's not something that should cause you to be afraid or fearful. If nothing else, it should cause you to have expectation and hope. One, because Jesus told us it's coming. So when it happens, you know it's coming. And he's also told us how this is going to end. It's going to end with Jesus coming and being victorious over those who chose to rebel against him. So what are you and I supposed to do in the meantime? We're waiting for these things to happen. We see these things and we think we're near the end. Well, Jesus has some words for us. And I want to share this one last verse for you before I end the podcast. In Matthew 24:13, Jesus, after telling about all the false prophets and the wars and people's love growing cold, he says this, but the one who endures to the end will be saved. Jesus calls us to hang on and endure. Yes, you got to put up with a lot of craziness. Yes, there's a lot of stuff that's happening. Don't give up your faith in him. Don't give up following or obeying him. And this last verse here, 14, this is truly a sign that you know the end is near. And this gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed throughout the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. I am excited about that verse. Why? Because Here's the deal. Jesus knows this world is going to end. Jesus knows that we have problems. But Jesus does not want to leave not one person, not one culture. He doesn't want to leave not one country behind. Isn't that exciting? He says, no, I am preparing to make sure that the whole world gets to hear about me. And then I'm going to wrap things up. I'm not going to let this world end any other way. But your job is to hang on. Your job, as the Bible says, is to endure. Just, you got a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of static. You need to listen to me. Listen to the word of God. Listen to Jesus. Be faithful to him. So, my friend, I don't know how you feel when you think about the end of the world. I don't know if it makes you nervous, if it makes you concerned. Um, Let me say this, that Jesus in the Bible has given us signs of the nearness of the end of all things. Your job, the only thing you need to do is have faith in him, to endure, not to give up. Oh, and by the way, there is one more thing we got to do. We need to find a way to tell others about Jesus, and that they can also find their hope, their help, their salvation in him. That's it. That's our job. Find a way to do it in your sphere. Find a way to share with Jesus with people in your sphere, because then you'll be helping to fulfill that last text. He says, the gospel of the world will be preached unto all nations, and then the end will come. You can help get the word to all nations, even in your own backyard. So focus on that. Focus on being a part of Jesus' last day group to tell the world. Everything else will take care of itself. Jesus is in charge. You can have hope, you can have confidence, and you can have peace. Thank you for listening to this episode. I'm Pastor Crespo, and this is my take. And I hope and pray that you found this to be inspiration to go. Hey, before you go, I want to invite you to be a digital missionary. You can do that by liking, commenting, sharing, or subscribing to this podcast, by sharing a link to this podcast on your own social media feeds. In doing this, you can help the mission of this podcast in sharing inspiration and hope with your world around you.